communism are so much greater at the national scale than they are at the local level. When one goes off to a state or a national scale, you're often in a different place geographically, at a central capital, with all sorts of other influences playing on you, economic interests, and it's much, much easier to become an opportunist, to become co-opted. Whereas at the local level, he thought it was much easier for the popular assemblies, for the popular democracy to keep the delegates under control, under supervision and under their control.
Eirik, books and supported that social ecology transcends the classic distinction of environmental ethics between anthropocentrism and ecocentrism. However, his theory doesn't seem capable of including all the philosophy of animal rights, whether it's based on rights of vegetarians or animals. More scientifically, it cannot constitute the philosophy of an animal rights movement. So, my question is, what are the ethical consequences towards the treatment of non-human animals from the perspective of social ecology?
I believe that social ecology can provide an ethics for an ecological movement concerned with the welfare of the ecology, including non-human life like animals. I believe that it can provide the movement with an ethics. However, I think that the important thing for social ecologists is to precisely make society capable of making those choices about ethics, about rationality in dealing with questions of production, distribution, technology, and also how society should interact with the natural world. The important thing is not, as I see it, our personal choices. For social ecologists, social ecologists not a purist ideology of one's stance on, say, questions of vegetarianism, alcohol, things like that. It's more a question of letting society become capable of making those decisions, hopefully in a rational and an ethical manner. So I think that the social ecological ethics in this respect, well, it can be discussed to a great extent, but I think that the important profound implication of the social ecological ethics here is to precisely make human beings become capable, not only politically and institutionally, but also ethically through our education and through our interaction with other people, members of the community, and to discuss what would be the right way of, what would be the correct way of treating animals. Is it right to use it in production? Should we limit our use of meat? Should we? And precisely to be able to make those decisions. Today, we're not politically capable of making them, apart from stopping to buy meat or not drinking Coca-Cola. Very lifestylist changes, and also taking very, in a sense, absolutist positions on this. And I believe that it is precisely the interaction between human beings that will give us the tools to become ethical beings that can deal with non-human nature in a rational way. I would argue for the minimization of to not have meat industries like today. I would go out and argue for limiting the use of meat and to make sure that we eat healthy food and so on. But I don't think there's an absolutist ethics in this, or an absolute moral code as in deep ecology or in the perspectives of animal rights, which suggests that animals have, or every living being has intrinsic value. Social sociology starts its discussion, I think, from a completely different perspective in discussing how can we deal with these matters in an ethical and rational way together with our fellow human beings and come up with the most rational solutions possible. And I think that well, you said Murray did not encompass or provide a philosophy for the animal rights movement. I think I'm not sure if even the concept of animal rights is appropriate. I would like to see a humane treatment of animals, and I'm very reluctant to accept the current trends of anti-speciesism, or to say that even eating meat or so is anthropocentric. I think there's big problems with those approaches. I think that yes, I think social ecology can provide us an ecological ethics without reducing the question to any absolute.
Janet, how does the notion of leadership that Bookchin developed in his late essays can be compromised with the anti-hierarchical values of the libertarian movement? Can you clarify this notion?
Right. This question has emerged a lot because, one reason it's emerged is because in the late 60s, Bookchin was at the forefront of criticizing vanguardism as part of his critique of Marxism, Leninism, of Stalinism. He objected to the idea of a vanguard party and was firm and decisive about this in a way that was very, very illuminating and helpful in discussions with and struggles with Marxists. Over the decades, he saw that there was a need for, that anarchists had quite a, at least that he encountered, had a difficult relationship with organization. He attended conferences that would devolve into chaos. He would attend conferences where every person was supposed to have the equal right to speak. There couldn't be chairs. It all had to be in a circle. If someone spoke too long, that was regarded as bad, even though if two people were carrying out an illuminating dialogue, this was rejected in favor of everybody having a turn to speak, even though a cacophony of voices is not always as illuminating as a one-on-one dialogue between two people. In any case, he felt that he took a closer look at the concept of vanguard, and he found that it was actually had been used by anarchists in earlier years. In fact, he had a magazine called Vanguardia from Spain. It's not that, and he looked again at the concept of influential militants, he would call them, that they were called in the Spanish Revolution. And the influential militants were really those who were, in effect, leaders. Now, it's not that he went back to accepting the concept of a vanguard. On the contrary, what he did was re-examine his critique of it, and he thought that there were always going to be people who were more knowledgeable than others, which were not intrinsically, not by nature, but just because they had more experience, that there were people who were had experiences that others didn't have, or that were more practiced in speaking than others had, that others were still developing their speaking abilities, and that these skills should be valued, and that these skills should be put to work within a movement, but not unaccountably. That's the important word. Leadership, he believed, should inevitably will exist, simply, if nothing else, just because of these differences of experience, but it must always be accountable. There's no back rooms, there's no backroom smoke and mirrors decision making on the part of vanguards or militants working behind the scenes. He advocated a high degree of complete transparency on the part of leaders, and decisions had to be clarified and understood by the base by the rest of the group before they could be implemented.
One question for Janet again. When we struggle against the state, we struggle against specific institutions of obedience and concentration of power. When we struggle against capitalism, we struggle against specific institutions of private property, of the means of production, the market, etc. Which institutions are we fighting in the case of sexism, for example? This is the question. Which are the institutions we have to fight in the case of sexism?
It's the critique of sexism became very important to Murray in the late 60s as a result of he worked with the radical feminists in the late 60s. You may know that a lot of the energy behind the early feminist movement in the United States came out of disaffected women who had been working in SDS, in the anti-war movement, in the student organizations, and his work with them, I think, was very influential in him developing his anti-hierarchical critique. In fact, he got very excited by the critique of sexism because he saw that gender relations were typical of the hierarchical relations that needed to be eliminated in order for us to have a free society. It was with dismay that he saw later on in the 70s and the 80s feminists aspiring to become corporate bosses or police chiefs. He thought that this would not lead to, this was not helpful in leading to a general emancipation. I think that the concept of I think that it's a commonplace within capitalist society that women have to work twice as hard as men to get to an equal place, and that the way society is organized too often requires women to perform a double day of work. While they may be moving very well up the corporate ladder, they very often still have to go home and do the bulk of the work in the so-called realm of necessity in the household with child rearing. So I think that, and yet within capitalism, technologies have developed that reduce the drudgery that women for millennia had to perform. Women no longer have to sit at a spinning wheel and spin cloth. They no longer have to go down to the river and wash the clothes in the river. We have machines now that can do this. I think that it's been a boon within, insofar as capitalism has developed the means of production. They've also meant capitalism has also developed technologies that have reduced the toil that women have had to perform historically, and that has been a huge emancipation, and it speaks to, again, the relevance of Murray's post-scarcity thinking and his post-scarcity idea. It's not reducing toil is not simply a matter of reducing toil in production, but also the toil in the domestic realm. The physically and politically decentralized society that we're talking about, that is a post-capitalist society, that's a cooperative society, I think will reduce the strong boundaries between the workplace and home, and thereby make it easier for women to participate, for women's participation in in production, in the larger society, in political life, to be on a par with men's, and easier for men to participate equally with childbearing and home responsibilities with women. I think that the political and fiscal decentralization will have a great deal to do with that, and I think that also in a cooperative society, it's certainly clear that childbearing and domestic functions could also be performed cooperatively.
What is your analysis of over the Zapatistas case? They built their movement gradually without getting a model in the first place, whilst at the same time they condemned elections. So, what is your analysis of their case?
My analysis of the Zapatista movement, I think that they've done much important work in their local communities. I think they've made some interesting decisions. I think they've made a lot of practical experiments, and above all, I think that they should be and are a source of inspiration, because although they have done important work in Chiapas or from the Lacandon, and if they've done important work in their regions, they have not yet. These are autonomous regions that, or semi-autonomous regions that have somehow been allowed to exist or fought their way to exist independently of the Mexican state. As such, it's a limited experiment, but it's really exciting. And what I see as the Zapatistas' greatest strength is that they've shown how it is possible to create a movement from below and to inspire people that do not live in the center of the capitalist economy and so on, to stake a claim for their humanity and dignidad, or dignity, as they have as one of their principal, what they struggle for, to be accepted as human beings with a dignity. I think that the strength of the Zapatistas, we could find practical examples, particular cases, but the strength of the Zapatistas is their example, their way of inspiration for other indigenous movements, for other community movements of community organizations, and for the extra-parliamentary left libertarian movements here in the West too. But I think that the real struggle remains, because what we want to do is not to create free spaces. We don't want only to have autonomous regions or create an autonomous Thessaloniki separated from the rest of the world, in a sense. What has been very interesting with the Zapatistas is their levels of communication and their ability to raise international solidarity and the support of people and solidarity groups all over the world. But the question remains how to take power away from the Mexican state, how to undo the free trade agreement that initially made the Zapatistas rise 1st of January 1994, and how to take away that the dominance of the nation state and the capitalist economy on our communities, whether it is in Mexico, Mexico City, a huge metropolis, or in the outskirts of the Lacandon jungle, or in Chiapas there, or if it's in the zones of the maquiladora industry, north of the border, south of the border, to the US, and the cities in America as well as in Latin America and the communities there. And I think that to this end, I think that we must, at some level, discuss how to struggle to create a dual power structure that will hollow out the power of the nation state in Mexico and elsewhere, which I think would have to face maybe elections or some kind of other kinds of takeover of a local institution on a larger scale, and also to combine it with the efforts with the community and the ordinary citizens in Mexico cities and in other cities. And this is not to judge the Zapatistas. On the contrary, I think that we should seek to learn from them and learn from the way they have managed to explain to people the legitimacy of their struggle, and how they managed to convey how their struggle is a just one. Because today in many countries here, the anarchist movements are not able to explain to ordinary people why their cause is a just one. And the Stalinist parties, like here it's, I don't know, it seems to me that not even their members believe in them. I think that in order to create this mass movement, this new popular movement that we're searching for, one that I hope will be libertarian and municipalist in orientation, we need to think about that. How can we explain that our struggle for control of society is one to reclaim our humanity and to reclaim our dignity? I think that's for me the strongest aspect of the Zapatista struggle.
Janet, for Marx, the main contradiction.
Can you speak louder, because the microphone doesn't.
Yes. For Marx, the main contradiction of capitalism is the relation between labor and capital. While for Bookchin, the limits of capitalism are external, and the contradiction is between capitalist growth and natural environment. Should we focus our struggle in this contradiction and the issues raised by it?
Should we focus our struggle for an ecological society on the contradictions between capitalism and the natural world? That's a basic component of what we're trying to do, in addition to the struggle against hierarchy. The face-to-face democracy that we're arguing for would be one that controlled the economy, that put the economy under municipal control, that is under popular control, and also popular democratic ownership. Only in this way, Bookchin argued, could the competitiveness that drives the grow-or-die market economy be eliminated. It seems, yes, and again, it's the important point that he always argued is creating a broader movement, because it's not a single group or a single movement or even a single country that can do this. There needs to be an international confederation of groups oriented this way, a larger movement in order to fight this seemingly gigantic system, and it is a gigantic system. But Murray did point out that in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church seemed to be, well, maybe not here, but in Western Europe, the Catholic Church seemed to be an impossibly gigantic entity that could not possibly ever lose any power at all. It's controlled every aspect of life, including down to the most intimate details of personal life, and yet religious, participation in the Western Church is very much reduced, and it's in not in many places not a significant player in many people's life. So that's by way of saying that a seemingly impossible institution to eliminate has been greatly reduced in power, and if it's been done once, it can happen again.
If there is someone who would like to comment anything about this that we shared, have some discussion on the themes we heard, or even you, if you want to discuss, to comment anything, and or else we should say something general for closing.
Something to add?
I would like a clarification on the issue of the elections. Because Janet said that when people are far away from the local societies that they elected, they may be corrupted. But there are cities nowadays that are so large that even Thessaloniki, that people from, I don't know, a place might be difficult to follow what is going on in the council or things like that. So what is the decisive difference? I keep in mind that the state doesn't have the potentiality to be democratized. It's anti-democratic by its nature, so to say. While the municipality has that potentiality. But when we see this